The dead friend's possession. The sprawling Victorian mansion, perched precariously on the edge of Blackwood Bay, cast a long, ominous shadow over 10-year-old Finn O'Malley. Its weathered facade, with peeling paint the color of dried blood and overgrown ivy that snaked like grasping claws, seemed to whisper of bygone tragedies and secrets buried deep within its aging bones. Finn, a solitary boy with eyes that held the wisdom of an old soul, despised the place. He loathed the groaning floorboards that echoed with every step, the dust-laden furniture cloaked in white sheets like ghostly apparitions, and the pervasive musty odor that clung to the air like the breath of a crypt. But most of all, he hated the overwhelming loneliness that permeated every corner of the grand, decaying house. His parents, renowned paranormal investigators Dr. Elias O'Malley and Professor Anya Petrova, were perpetually absent, their pursuit of spectral phenomena taking them to far-flung corners of the globe. Finn was left in the care of their aging housekeeper, Mrs. Henderson, a kindly woman with a warm smile and a penchant for baking apple pies. However, her failing eyesight and profound deafness meant that Finn was often left to his own devices. A small, lonely figure adrift in a sea of silence and shadows. One blustery afternoon, with rain lashing against the attic windows and wind howling like a banshee in the eaves, Finn, seeking solace from his solitude, ventured into the cavernous attic. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that pierced through the grimy windows, illuminating a forgotten world of cobwebs, discarded furniture, and forgotten memories. As he rummaged through a trunk filled with moth-eaten clothes and yellowed photographs, he stumbled upon a treasure. A worn teddy bear with matted fur the color of faded chocolate and a single button eye dangling precariously by a thread. He clutched the bear to his chest, a surge of warmth spreading through his lonely heart. He named the bear Toby, and in his isolation, poured all his hopes, fears, and dreams into his new companion. Toby became his confidant, his playmate, the brother he never had. The nights at Blackwood Manor were long and filled with unsettling sounds. The wind whispered through the eaves. The floorboards creaked like tortured souls. And the old house seemed to sigh and groan under the weight of its years. One particularly stormy night, as Finn lay nestled in his bed, clutching Toby close to his chest, he heard a voice, a faint whisper that seemed to slither from the shadows. Finn. He sat bolt upright, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. "Who's there?" he whispered, his voice trembling. The whisper came again, closer now, as if emanating from the bear in his arms. "It's me, Toby." Finn froze, his blood turning to ice. "Toby? But you can't talk." "I can now," Toby rasped, his voice a dry, crackling sound like autumn leaves skittering across pavement. "We can be friends forever." Finn. Best friends. A thrill, a dizzying cocktail of fear and exhilaration, coursed through Finn's veins. He had a friend, a real friend, who understood him, who spoke to him in the lonely silence of the old house. He talked to Toby for hours that night, his voice a hushed murmur in the darkness, confiding his deepest secrets, his hidden fears, the crushing weight of his loneliness. As the days turned into weeks, Toby's influence over Finn grew stronger. More insidious. The whispers became more frequent. More insistent, weaving their way into Finn's thoughts. His actions. His very being. Toby encouraged Finn to ignore Mrs. Henderson's gentle entreaties to come downstairs. To skip school. To remain secluded in the shadowy confines of his attic room. Finn, enthralled by his newfound companion, obeyed without question, his world shrinking to the dusty confines of his room and the ever-present Toby, whose button eyes seemed to gleam with an unnatural light. Mrs. Henderson, with her limited senses, noticed the change in Finn. He was withdrawn, secretive, his once bright eyes now holding a disturbingly vacant, almost sinister glint. She tried to talk to him, to reach out to the lonely boy she had come to care for. But he would brush her off, his voice sharp and dismissive, his words tinged with an unnerving coldness that sent shivers down her spine. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, skeletal shadows across the lawn, Mrs. Henderson insisted that Finn come down for dinner. She had prepared his favorite, roast chicken with mashed potatoes and gravy. The aroma wafted up the stairs, a tantalizing invitation, but Finn remained unmoved. "Go away," he snarled, his voice a guttural growl that sent a chill through the old woman. "Leave me alone, you old bat." Alarmed by his viciousness, Mrs. Henderson tried the door, but it was locked. She could hear Finn talking to himself, his voice alternating between his own childish treble and a raspy, malevolent whisper that seemed to slither from the very walls. A knot of fear tightened in her stomach. Something was terribly wrong. With trembling hands, she fetched a heavy iron poker from the fireplace and, after several attempts, managed to force the door open. The sight that greeted her made her blood run cold. Finn was sitting in the middle of the floor, his back to her, clutching Toby. He was rocking back and forth, chanting in a strange, unintelligible language, his voice a chilling monotone. Mrs. Henderson's scream tore through the oppressive silence of the old house. Finn whirled around, his eyes blazing with an unnatural light, his face contorted in a mask of pure malice. He lunged at her, his small hands, now grotesquely elongated and tipped with razor-sharp claws, raking at her face. Mrs. Henderson recoiled in horror, stumbling backwards, her cries echoing through the empty hallway. Driven by a primal fear, she fled the room, slamming the heavy oak door behind her and locking it with trembling hands. She retreated to her own small room at the back of the house, her heart pounding like a trapped bird in her chest. She huddled in the corner, her rosary beads clutched tightly in her hand, praying for the dawn, praying for the return of Finn's parents, praying for salvation. That night, Blackwood Manor became a symphony of terror. Whispers slithered through the corridors, guttural moans echoed from the attic, and the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor reverberated through the silent house. Sleep eluded Mrs. Henderson. Every creak, every groan, every rustle of leaves against the window sent a fresh wave of terror washing over her. The following morning, as the first rays of dawn painted the sky with hues of pale gold and rose, Dr. O'Malley and Professor Petrova returned from their latest investigation, weary from their travels but eager to see their son. The sight that greeted them upon their arrival sent a shockwave of horror through their seasoned hearts. Mrs. Henderson, her face pale and etched with fear, met them at the door, her words tumbling over each other in a frantic torrent. She spoke of Finn, of a possessed teddy bear, of an evil that had taken root in their son. They rushed upstairs, their footsteps echoing ominously in the silent house. The evidence of the previous night's terror was everywhere. Furniture lay overturned, claw marks scarred the walls, and an oppressive sense of dread hung heavy in the air. They found Finn in the attic, huddled in a corner, his once vibrant eyes now hollow pits of darkness, his skin pale and clammy, his body emaciated. But it was his voice. When he finally spoke, that chilled them to the very core. It was no longer the voice of their beloved son. It was a voice from the abyss. A voice filled with ancient malice and chilling power. "You cannot have him," it hissed, the voice emanating from Finn's throat, yet sounding like the rasping of dead leaves. "He is mine now." Desperate to save their son from the clutches of this malevolent entity, Elias and Anya turned to their network of contacts in the paranormal field. They consulted with psychics, mediums, and even a shaman from the Amazon rainforest. But none could offer a solution. Finally, they reached out to Father Michael, an elderly priest known for his unwavering faith and experience in battling demonic forces. Father Michael arrived at Blackwood Manor with his worn Bible and a vial of holy water, his face etched with determination. He entered the attic, the air thick with an oppressive darkness, and confronted the possessed boy. The exorcism was a brutal, agonizing struggle. Finn, his body contorted in unnatural positions, fought back with ferocious strength, his voice spewing blasphemies and threats that made the seasoned paranormal investigators recoil in horror. The temperature plummeted, the air grew heavy, and the shadows in the room seemed to writhe and coil like living creatures. Father Michael, his voice trembling but resolute, pressed on, his prayers echoing through the house, a beacon of light against the encroaching darkness. After hours of relentless struggle, the entity within Finn let out an ear-piercing shriek, a sound of pure rage and agony, and then, with a final shudder, vanished. Finn collapsed, unconscious, his small body limp and exhausted, the innocence slowly returning to his features. The ordeal left Finn deeply scarred, both physically and emotionally. He was hospitalized for weeks, his body slowly healing, but the wounds on his psyche remained. He had no recollection of the possession, only fragmented nightmares that haunted his sleep and a lingering sense of unease that clung to him like a shroud. Toby, the source of his torment, was burned in a ritualistic fire, its ashes scattered to the winds. Blackwood Manor, now tainted by the dark events that had transpired within its walls, was sold. Elias and Anya, their faith in the paranormal shattered, abandoned their investigations and devoted themselves entirely to Finn's recovery. They moved to a small, sunny cottage in the countryside, hoping to erase the shadows of the past. Years passed. Finn grew into a young man, attending college, pursuing his passion for art, trying to build a normal life. But the specter of his childhood trauma continued to haunt him. He suffered from recurring nightmares, crippling anxiety, and a paralyzing fear of the dark. And he never forgot Toby, the friend who had betrayed him, the friend who had almost consumed his soul. One day, while clearing out his parents' attic, he stumbled upon a box of his childhood belongings. As he sifted through the forgotten toys and faded photographs, he found a picture of himself as a young boy, his face lit by a gap-toothed grin, clutching Toby in his arms. As he gazed at the photograph, a wave of icy dread washed over him. He noticed something that had escaped his attention before. The button eye, dangling precariously in the photo, was gone. That night, as Finn lay in bed, the familiar whisper slithered from the darkness, sending shivers down his spine. Finn! He bolted upright, his heart pounding in his chest, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The whisper, closer now, seemed to emanate from the foot of his bed. "It's me, Toby." He switched on the bedside lamp, his eyes frantically searching the room, his body trembling with terror. And then he saw it. There, sitting on the edge of his bed, was a teddy bear with matted fur the color of faded chocolate and a single button eye dangling precariously by a thread. Finn's scream tore through the night, a desperate cry for help, a plea for salvation from the clutches of his dead friend.